Please make very welcome. He's getting on a plane later this afternoon to head up to Sydney, and then he'll be heading back to the USA. Vince Emanuele from Iraq, Veterans Against the War.
Well, it's good to be here, brothers and sisters. Thanks for inviting me to Australia. It's a pleasure to take a vacation from the Empire as well. I want to mention something that Jacob had said. None of this is new in the United States. You could go back to the late 1700s and the Sedition Act that tried to silence Thomas Jefferson and the writing of the Declaration of Independence. You could go back to the 1800s when government agencies and police forces in the Army and the National Guard ruthlessly and brutally murdered and suppressed the Union movement throughout the United States. You could go back to the early part of the 20th century and the formation of the CIA. And you could look at what the CIA has done around the world, brutally murdering and instituting torture campaigns and overthrowing democratically elected governments around the world for 80 years. You could look at what happened to the '68 generation with the COINTEL program and what they did to the Black Panthers and what they did to the American Indian movement and what they did to SDS and the Students for Democratic Society and what they did to the communists and what they did to the socialists and what they did to the anarchists. And it didn't matter because a lot of times those groups were also fighting each other, looking at each other as the enemy instead of looking at who the real enemy was and is and continues to maintain to be today. And these entities and these apparatuses and these institutions within the United States will go to any length. Much as the history of Australia, we've already brutally and genocidally murdered most of the Native Americans on the continent. We've enslaved and continue to enslave Black Americans in prisons and have done so for 400 years. As Chris Hedges often says, many Americans are now being pushed and ushered into internal colonies. Places like Cleveland, places like Detroit, places like Chicago, Illinois. So none of this is new in the United States, and we shouldn't pretend as if it is new around the world either. How does this manifest in very personal ways? Well, in 2010, 23 anti-war activists in the United States had their homes invaded by the FBI. Two of those people, Joe Ossabaker and Stephanie Werner, are personal friends of mine who reside in Chicago. They're now charged with providing material support to terrorist entities overseas as they were doing solidarity work with people in Colombia and in Palestine. It's as real as it gets when you're sitting in someone's dinner table and their kids had to be moved to the other room because 35 FBI officers with AK-47s and assault rifles in full tactical gear kick the door in, come into your house, go through all of your belongings, all of your stuff, and then now you're waiting for a grand jury trial in limbo, almost as a non-citizen, which is also becoming normalized. That's how it manifests itself in very personal ways. When people I talk to on a weekly basis are still worried about whether or not they're going to have to spend 30 years to the rest of their life in jail because they wanted to do solidarity work with people in Palestine. And those are the consequences, and that's what's taking place in America. It's not esoteric, it's not abstract, it's not out there. And we are the ones who are next. And anyone who thinks, oh, I just signed petitions, or oh, I don't talk about violent revolution, or oh, I'm not doing anything like this, and you think you're going to be safe, I think we all need to be very aware that we are the ones who are going to be watched and are being watched. We should probably say hello to whoever's out there now from the government. The last message I would like to leave you with is twofold. One, things in the United States are extremely bad. Anyone telling you different is absolutely insane, from the child poverty rate to the outsourcing of jobs to $7.25 an hour for a minimum wage to no universal health care to people going $200,000 in debt to get a decent college education, continued gentrification, the prison industrial complex with the largest prison population in the world, the proliferation of drones as we now have 62 drone operating bases on domestic soil in the United States with the Miami Police Department, the Houston Police Department, and the Los Angeles Police Department using drone technology. And what's the justification? Latin American immigration. I'm assuming the same justification will be used in Australia, although not coming from Latin America. The racism, the patriarchy, the sexism, the homophobia, all of that is inherent to the American culture now. I suggest you distance yourselves as Australian citizens from America and the American empire, because the alliance you have now is going to continue to deteriorate as the situation in America continues to deteriorate. And when I got off the plane here, what worried me is I already see the Hungry Jacks. I already see the McDonald's. I already see the Subways. I already talked to people who are like, oh wow, we get to watch Walking Dead 8 hours after you guys watch it in the United States. I say fuck that culture. Get rid of that culture, create independent cultures, and distance yourself from that. Because that passive consumer society is what now has led to the fastest collapsing industrial society in the world. And where can we find hope? Well, as my friend Emerson and I were just talking about yesterday and today, look to Egypt. Look at our brothers and sisters in Greece. Look at our brothers and sisters in Brazil. Look at our brothers and sisters in Montreal. Look at our brothers and sisters in Portugal. Look at our brothers and sisters in Africa. There are people around the world that are resisting. They've been in the streets for years. They are willing to give their lives, die, be put in jail, be beaten by the police and the state apparatus in order to get what we want. And I think if we're looking for hope, we don't have to look far, and we need to always remember that we're in solidarity with those who are struggling around the globe. I want to thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in Australia, so thank you.
Thank you, Vince.